What's up? Welcome to Creative Control. Thank you for clicking on this video, or tapping on this video, I guess you could say, considering it is 2025. We're happy to see you. If you're coming back when we've seen you before, good to see you again. If not, nice to meet you. My name's Alex. We got EASTON in the back, and today we're getting into 10 questions about podcasting that no one's really answering. I think a lot of the basics have been touched on at this point. I know we've definitely done our fair share of content that I feel like are pretty elementary, basic questions that you could probably either figure out for yourself, or you could do a couple other taps around the YouTube world and find somebody else talking about it and giving some pretty sound advice. And so with that said, I wanted to sit down and really dive into 10 things that are not being discussed. And if they are, they're being discussed at very surface level. And so we put together a list of 10 questions here. We're going to dive into them. We're going to walk through point by point. Easton and I are going to go back and forth. Truth be told, I haven't read all of these yet. I read some of them, the ones that I brought to the table. Easton brought some other ones. And so we will work through point by point. These are 10 podcasting questions no one's really answering. And while you're here, by the way, like, subscribe, comment, all that. We appreciate you. Happy to see you here. If there's other questions that are on this list that we don't get to, or that are not on this list that we don't get to, please throw them in the comments. We'll do another one of these. One, how do I create a podcast that's binge-worthy, not just consistent? Awesome question. I think that consistency is something that's really easy to preach. I say that as somebody who preaches consistency. I'm very quick to say, the best podcasts are the ones that have done pretty much one episode a week for the last years without missing, or very rare misses, because being consistent keeps you on people's radar and keeps you in people's, what we call like a starting lineup of podcasts, the pods that you go to consistently week over week. That's a very easy thing to tell somebody to do. It's not very deep. It's pretty straightforward and very practical. You can go and start being consistent tomorrow. But this is different. This is how do you, okay, we're going to be consistent, but how do you make sure that not only do people watch once, but they want to dive even deeper onto your content? And I think this is something that, as there's more and more noise in the podcast space, it becomes more and more important that you're giving people content that separates you from the rest of the noise out there. I would say, to answer this question, now that I've preambled, what makes listeners want to watch and then also hit next episode? I would say not trailing off at the end of the episode. I think a lot of times with podcasts, you sense it coming to the end of the episode. You can feel it. Whether it's their tones they start to dwindle and they just kind of they're tired. Basically, they're getting fatigued. Or it just drags on and they just run out of subject matter. The energy might be there, but they might just not have anything good to talk about anymore. This goes for entertainment shows. This also goes for professional shows. And I think making sure that your episodes are at a runtime that fits you and your abilities and your subject matter, so that when you get towards the end of the episode, you're ending it strong with a bang. You still have momentum at the end of it. And then also, I would say a little tactic here that you can implement immediately is put a CTA on the end of the episode. This is something that I love. I think a lot of people who are doing this at a high level are adding a CTA at the end of the episode. Most people stop at like, subscribe. They say like, subscribe, follow us, all that type of stuff. I think the better reward that your audience member could really give you is like, hey, hit play on the next one. We'd love to have you. Like, we have this one right here in the corner. You can click on it, type thing. I think that's a very missed out on opportunity for podcasters when it comes to creating a binge-worthy show where people can go episode, instead of just tuning in, appointment viewing type thing like once a week. Easton, you got anything on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think, to your point, I think being concise and short is underrated.
Yeah. There's like, if you can only do 20 minutes, do a 20-minute podcast. There's no need to try to stretch that long. You're just going to lose people's interest. So I don't know. There's sub questions on some of these. Like, is there a formula for momentum? I don't know about a formula, but I do know tactically those are a couple of things that just immediately can make a massive difference in probably your viewer retention. It's just making sure that your episodes stay dense and you finish strong with a bang and keep that energy moving, so that and then tell them, hey, go get the next one. Question 2, how do I find my voice as a host, parentheses, without copying other creators? Phenomenal question. I think that it's very easy to see other podcasters out there. That might even be the reason why you get into podcasting, is you see somebody else that you're a fan of doing it at a high level and you aspire to be like them. And unfortunately, those aspirations sometimes, because of human nature, can turn into imitation. And that's where you get off the path. That's bad. We don't want to imitate. We want to instead spectate, learn things from people, and then appropriate what they're doing in a way that fits your brand or your personality, your persona, so that we're not blatantly ripping off, but instead we're learning and stealing like an artist. We're going to take something from somebody who's doing this at a successful level and implement it in our own creative way. I think that said, finding your own voice comes through that, paired with really, really, really devoted repetition. I think, like anything, practice doesn't make perfect, but it makes you better for sure. And I would say the more episodes you do, the better you're going to get at this. I know many podcasters who have recorded their first episodes and scrapped it, and then come back with the second episode that they record, and that ends up being the first one that goes out, just because they needed one to get it out of the way. Now, I think going any further than that, you're spinning your wheels and you're wasting your time. If you were like, hey, I've recorded 5, but I'm not going to put any of them out, I'd be like, dude, at some point, you just got to put this thing out there. Like, you got to put it out and be okay with what it is. And knowing that still every episode after that, you're going to get better. And by the way, your audience understands too that you're going to get better over time. So I think practice, get the reps in, put the shots up in the gym. That helps you to develop presence on the mic. That helps you to get comfortable. That helps you find your tone. That helps you immensely overall with the confidence that you're going to need to be able to sit on a microphone and speak about whatever you want to speak about, whether it's to a guest or just to a camera straight to you guys. So I think those are just a couple things that I would recommend. Then the next point is, how do I stop sounding stiff? Yeah, I think it's just more comfortability. I think the first time you do anything, whether it's a physical activity or a mental exercise, there is a kind of like trying to find my sea legs about it. Like we've all seen like the baby giraffe who's got the long ass legs and is just like doesn't know how to use them yet. But over time, they become this massive, graceful, beautiful creature who just roams around God's green earth gracefully. Didn't know you'd get a giraffe analogy today, did you? But here we are. It takes time, and that giraffe, takes 10,000 steps before it's at a place where it knows how to use those long legs. And you too can learn how to use your long legs in podcasting if you just put in the reps. All right. What is the best way to grow without relying on guest audiences? I think guest shows are a cheat code, obviously, because by having guests on, you're immediately accessing their audience. So it's absolutely, I recommend it. We do it here. But I don't think it's a necessity. And so I think without guest audiences, you just need to make sure that you're focused on presenting very, very strong content week to week, marketing it in a way that you're putting it in front of your audience. And on the back end of that, learning from the feedback to inform yourself on your strategy so that you can better serve that audience. Know who that audience is, cater your content to that audience, and put it out on a consistent basis so that you're feeding that algorithm and showing those platforms like, hey, this is the type of content that this channel puts out. So for example, for us, we won't do a ton of guest content here. We will have guests occasionally. But the majority of, I think, what we're doing is going to be stuff like this. Great. That's cool. But it definitely presents that unique challenge that is being asked in this question. So whether it's a choice that you just don't want to lean into guests, or it's something like you just don't have access to big names that would be, or people that would be good guests, I think you just need to make sure you have something else to provide your audience consistently, and then really, really got to be even more more persistent with your strategy to make sure that you're not growing complacent. Because with guests, you can afford the luxury sometimes of growing complacent because, we have so-and-so on and they reshare it and then we get a pop from it. We didn't really have to do much. Without that, it can be more difficult. Next question. How do I turn my podcast into a brand, not just a show? Dude, yes, absolutely yes. This is the question that every podcast should ask themselves, by the way. Even the fact, by the way, of viewing it as a show and not just a podcast is a good step in the right direction. I think turning a podcast into a brand does not happen by accident. It happens with incredible foresight and planning. If I go back to like when we were working with Bussin With The Boys, I was working with them back in, I think it came on their late teens episodes. It was a podcast at the time. They were focused mostly on audio. They needed some help on the social media side of things. And so I got in there and I said, I have this model, here we go. And you can hear that story in some other episodes where we talk about video and growth. But when I installed that, it became very clear to all of us as we kept talking about what Bussin was creatively that, hey, there's way more here than just a couple guys on the bus talking about football. Immediately there was, well, we're doing cool stuff outside of the bus. We should capture that. That should be vlog. So now we have a vlog series. We called it Under the Hood. Still, I think, one of my proudest. I love that. I think that Under the Hood is such a sick name for that show. So they have that vlog now component that is running alongside the podcast. And what that does is it builds out the personalities that you get on the podcast in a different context. So you're seeing them outside of the bus in the real world, in the wild, if you will, doing their thing, doing other things than just sitting in the confines of the space that is the bus that you just see as like, okay, well, it's the studio. We only know studio versions of them. No, now you're getting access to them at home. You're getting access to them at games. You're getting access to them during travel. You're getting access to them at meals. This is what starts to build larger than life personalities. And over time with Bussin With The Boys, that's exactly what happened. It was some new guys came on, Jack and Garrett came in. Jack specifically was very focused on like, I want to develop social segments, similar to like Barstool, Ask the Internet type stuff. That started to build out not only the team at Bussin in a different light that added to the world we were creating, but we had our guests start participating in those types of activities, which built them out in a different way. So I think the summary of that story is you turn a podcast into a brand by building a universe around it. And it becomes one planet within the solar system of what the show is. That leads to merch. That leads to live events. By the way, we were doing Sunday tailgates every Titans home game here in Nashville because that was the fan base who was listening to the show. That was the original Bussin With The Boys audience, was like 5,000 people who were tuning in to just listen to those boys talk ball. That was it. Not that was it, like to minimalize it. Like that was the nucleus of what that show is. And I think even the fan base now still has that core going strong for it. And so I think it's that community gets built out in the universe that you design around your podcast. So I would say like takeaway advice on that one, sit down and look at what your show is and then put it in a circle in the middle of a page and then draw spokes out from it. And every spoke that you draw out from that should be another planet that is rotating around that sun that is your show. So this planet is live events. What do those look like? This planet is live podcasts. Those could be two different things, like a get-together type thing, networking type thing, happy hour type thing, and then a podcast live recording type thing. Then there's a merch component. Then there's a vlog component. Then the list goes on. Then there's a Patreon. I think all those spokes are how you build out that whole thing. And I really like that solar system analogy, actually. That does hit. I just on the fly, but I'm going to definitely pocket that one. That's good. So think beyond your episodes. That's how. How do I navigate creator burnout when the algorithm never sleeps? This is a question that I think all creators and editors are asking themselves right now. Because social never sleeps was the original. And the shitty part about that is your paychecks do. You know, no one's getting paid for 24-hour work out here. So that's part of the problem. But so how do you navigate the burnout? I think by being really realistic about what you're actually able to bite off. I think humans do this thing where we bite off more than we can chew consistently. We get really overambitious in our excitement to do something new or to ramp something up that we're already doing. And it leads to, I think, us saying, I can commit to X, Y, Z. And meanwhile, sustainably, I can really only do X. And so then I run for 3 months doing that. And then I quit the whole thing because I just can't keep all the plates spinning anymore. So I think on the mental health side of podcasting and content creation, there's a lack of self-awareness from that perspective. Just understanding, hey, this is my schedule. This is how much time I actually have in a day. This is the amount of energy I have in a day is probably even a better way to look at it. And if you are putting yourself in a position where you're biting off more than you can chew, then you're not going to be able to sustain that over time. And that will lead you to dip in that output. And then that dip will then make you really sad and depressed because you let yourself down. And I'm speaking from experience here. And it's sad and it's depressing and you don't want to get out of bed. But then finally you're going to be like, I got to get back to it. And then you're going to overcommit again. And we see people do this with the gym, and we see people do this with new diets. And it's why you see people do this. And I've termed it as, it's fleeting inspiration. You feel very inspired in the moment, and it lasts for so long, and then you drop it. And we all know people like this. You know people like this watching this right now. It might be you if you're really self-aware. Sometimes it's me, for sure. So I'll be accountable on that. But there's certain people who have this habit of it, and the only way to break out of it is to be very honest with yourself. Look yourself in the metaphorical mirror and understand how much time and energy you actually have to allot to the thing that you're trying to turn out. So if it's a podcast, don't go do, 10 episodes a week. You only need to do 1. Let's start with 1. If you get to a point where you're like, I can do 2, then ramp up. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you're powering down. So that'll kill your growth. Set your boundaries for yourself. Be realistic about kind of what you're able to bite off. EASTON, you want to share any experience for you as far as like burnout and everything? Because I know you're somebody who goes hard.
Yeah, I mean, I've never super struggled with it. I think having a process helps. Like having processes to where it's, I guess it is the same thing like week in and week out, but making it to where it's repeatable and having kind of steps for different things helps it not be as much of a stress week to week. Because once you build that process, it also kind of, especially if you're a producer or someone who's working on multiple shows or launching your own show, and you have multiple shows that you're launching, being able to have processes that then carry over to other shows no matter what they are, kind of helps just keep it manageable week to week, I'd say. Yeah,
that's good. I like that. Process. I mean, I'm a huge systems process guy. I think that's why we've been able to scale the way that we have. And I don't think that's just limited to an agency circumstance. I think that can be an independent creator as well. So yeah, set yourself up so you set yourself up for success. Basically, that's what all of that is saying. Should I think about my podcast like a business or an art project? Well, what do you want it to be? I think podcasts can be a lot of things, and I think that's the beauty and the curse of it. There's shows out there that are extremely creative and are not designed for a mass audience. There's shows out there that are extremely creative and are designed for a mass audience, by the way. But I think then there's the obvious shows that are like, okay, this one is, they're trying to make money here. Like, that's what this is. Look at, what's her name show? What's the Kelsey wife's name? Gosh, I'll get crushed. What's her name? Mrs. Kelsey. Kylie Kelsey. It's because Mrs. Kelsey. Kylie Kelsey's show is to make money. That's why that show's there. That's not, it doesn't feel like a passion project. It's, I'm going to have this show where I'm going to have very concise conversations with very high profile names. Now that said, that's not a slight to her.
Well, I think there was, for her circumstance, I think there was demand for it. So
Absolutely.
It's like if you have super demand for something and it's like, I'll make some money off of it. I don't think that's you're just in it for the money type of thing. It's just like,
no,
you want it, it's there.
Let me also, just real quick aside, if you are just in it for the money, that's okay too. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's kind of what this question is like, the creative versus the business at the end of the day. And I think that just comes down to, well, what do you want out of this? If you want this to make money, you better view this thing as a business. If you're going to view it as if you just want this to be a passion project and something fun that you create on, then it's an art project. It just comes down to where you want to land at the end of the day. How do you balance that? Like, how do you balance the creativity while still making it profitable? I think it's a sliding scale. And I struggle with this often, and I struggle with it less now than I used to because I've really worked on it. But it can be hard when you want, like, oh, this shot looks so much sicker than that shot, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but you're the only one who thinks that. And, like, it's a creative choice. And then sometimes we have to, not sometimes, all the time, we need to deal with the repercussions of our creative choices. And sometimes that means not as profitable. So it just comes down to knowing what your end goal is, and then making sure that you keep a constant pulse on like how you're balancing creative and the business. And I think that goes for, again, podcasts and all content.
Yep.
Think we've answered that okay?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's harder when
it's a hard one.
I think it's harder when you're solo. Like when you're by yourself and you don't really necessarily have anyone who like takes the other side. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're there by yourself,
yeah,
it's harder to balance that. Whereas I feel like if you have two people who like have two different,
you can hold each other accountable. Kind
of.
Yeah,
like we have, like me and you, for example, have a lot of times where we're on two different sides of things.
Yeah,
and it's like we didn't even think about the other side of it, and
definitely
you come together with like, okay, that's a better option.
Definitely.
Whereas if you're by yourself, then chances are you think your way is always the right way.
Yeah.
Or you're sitting there battling with yourself between two options.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's harder solo. So yeah, I would say, I mean, even just people who don't even, what I always used to do is like just ask people who have nothing to do with anything.
Yep.
Like if you have a show about golf, go ask someone who doesn't like golf about this. Or if you have a show about, I don't even know, dude, cooking, and someone who doesn't like to cook, just be like, what do you think about this? Just as someone who doesn't care or know anything about it, to kind of get that mass appeal and kind of get out of your specific thing. Because I feel like a lot of times people get so involved in their one thing that it's like they can't look outside of their close-knit bubble. And it's like there's so many more people who are going to see this who don't notice those 10 things.
Yep.
And you're not making the podcast for yourself. You're making it for the audience.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. Okay, great. I like. Moving on. What's the future of podcasting? Where is this actually going? First of all, it then says from there, video first, live, AI content, The answer is, drum roll please, yes. That's the answer. The answer is yes, video first, and it's been video first for about 4 years now, if you've been paying attention. The answer is yes, live. There are many, many, many shows now touring the country like they are a music act, booking out theaters and arenas. I don't know if anyone's done a podcast in a stadium yet. If anyone's been like, hey, I'm playing Gillette Stadium where the Patriots play. But that's going to happen. I promise it's going to happen. It's going to be sick, and they're going to sell 50,000 tickets, and it's going to be nuts. The audio is going to be trash, but it'll be sick. Yeah, Amazon will do it, I'm sure. AI content, yes, there are fully AI shows. That's a thing. We're here. All of these things are here right now. And what is going to happen next, since you asked, is all of that will be honed in so the cream will rise to the top. In the same way that podcasting in its previous iteration has played out. First, it was audio, and it started as like there's a few, and then there's more, and then there's a lot, and then the best audio players rose to the top. And then there was video, and then there was some video, and then there was more video, and then there was all the video, and where we're at now, I would say, we've seen the cream has risen to the top, and there's still new shows sprouting up every day. There's still new audio shows transitioning to video every single day, and they're getting better and better as we go. The podcasting game is the same as any other media has been in history. It will continue to grow and mature, and there will be more and more, and there will be refinement and refinement and refinement until we reach whatever the next media is. And I don't know what that'll be. If I knew that, I probably wouldn't tell you. I'd just find a way to exploit the fact that I know and no one else does. But we saw this through video. We've seen this through live, and I do think AI is the next piece of this that is really going to start to hit a maturation point. And based on how fast everything else moves in AI, I would guess that's probably going to happen faster than we saw video evolve or than we saw live evolve. So that's kind of like big picture. Let me give an answer that is more concise and like very tangible. Watch out for companies like Netflix buying or starting their own video podcasts. That's already in talks. At the last, I think it was the last earnings call, Netflix mentioned video podcasts. It's something they're definitely interested in. It's on their radar. What they're doing right now with Kill Tony is very interesting, where they've taken that show onto the platform. Not a traditional podcast, but I do think that's next. And like I said in the past, like Letterman's show that he did with Netflix, he did a few seasons of it. That's basically a video podcast. He's doing the same thing I'm doing right here, sitting down in two chairs. Oprah's show, I think she was on Hulu. Same exact thing. It's like Conversations with Oprah or whatever it is. She's sitting in two chairs having conversations. Like these things have been there. I just think now there's enough momentum behind the podcast space as a whole that platforms like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, HBO Max, they're all now starting to say like, oh, we can tap into that talent base and start pulling people up from there. And I'm excited about that. I think that's really interesting. I think that's fun. So how do I stay ahead of the curve? Keep paying attention. Listen, watch, have conversations, like, subscribe right here. Stay tapped in because it's moving fast and it's a little scary, but we're all in it together. What do I do when my podcast plateaus or loses steam? Yeah, don't panic, first of all. Podcast growth is something that looks like this. I'll do it this way so it's mirrored for you guys. So it's from your starting point. You're going to go slow growth, and then you're going to have like a big guest or like a clip pops off for you, and you're going to get a lot of traffic all of a sudden. So you get a spike, and then it'll come back down. And when you come back down from that spike, you hope that where you now newly settle as your baseline is higher than your baseline before the spike. So you spike, you pick up new audience there, and then you come back to your baseline a little bit higher than the last one, and then another viral moment or another big guest, and then spike, and then again you come back down to a new baseline and you settle in hopefully higher than your last baseline. That's like consistent podcast growth if you zoom out on a growth track. There are some obviously cases where it's like you hit something massive and this thing hockey sticks and you never come anywhere near where your previous baseline is. I think Club Shay Shay with Cat Williams is an example of that. As big as that show already was, they hit that and he did like 60 million in 2 days. Excuse me. And that is disgusting growth. Insane. And so he never sniffed the baseline before that, which was like 800K a video or something like that, like bananas. So I think when your podcast does reach a point where you've stopped getting those spikes, it's important to really dive into the analytics and figure out what is going on. Because to me, if a podcast tells me they've plateaued, to me that also says they've stopped listening or stopped paying attention to what their audience is telling them, or they've gone away from what was working before without realizing it. So they've lost the plot. They've gotten to a point where maybe they were having great guests and then they just felt like we could do this on our own. We're not going to do guests because maybe it's annoying to book guests or something like that. Or they ran out of guests. Whatever the reason is, something was working and then it stopped working. So let's figure out what stopped working or what is different now than it was before we hit the plateau. And then also let's dive into the data. Let's look at the YouTube analytics. Let's look at our viewer retention. Where are we losing people? Are people not sharing our social content anymore? Has the engagement died down on our clips? These are all symptoms of a dying or a plateaued show. I would also say if a show has plateaued, it is dying. I think it's inevitable. Your audience will start to trail off because something is wrong. There's a hole in the ship. So I think that's how to diagnose it. How to change it is go back to what was working. Figure it out and go back to it. Or if you can't go back to whatever that thing was, maybe you had a co-host leave you or something. I don't know. figure out something new that works, try new things. Because it's like, I got a buddy, my buddy Mike played baseball, and he like 5 times in a row, like grounded out to second base, which like sucks. That's a very defeating, if you know baseball, ground out to second base is like really pathetic. It sucks. He did it like 5 times in a row, and he came back in the dugout. One of the vets on the team who had a lot more experience than he did pulled him aside, and he goes, "Hey, do something different, because clearly this isn't working, and you've done it now 5 times. It's the age-old, like, doing the same thing. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results." That's what he was doing. And so he went in there and reassessed his swing. What do I need to do differently? Is my approach off? How do I switch something up? Because right now what's happening now is not working. If I do something different, it can't get worse. So let's just do something else. And it worked out. Surprise. So I think just figuring out, like, trial and error until you find something that's like, all right, cool, we got it. A sub question on this also says knowing when to push versus pause. Don't pause. You don't learn anything if you pause. The only reason I would say is you should pause is to take a look at the data. That's it. And I would say 1 week, because it should. And I mean, honestly, you should be able to do that in 2 hours. That shouldn't take you a week of time to analyze that. So yeah, what do you do when you plateau? Diagnose it and then try something else. How do I stand out in a sea of people saying the same things? Do I niche harder or go against the grain? Interesting. How do I break patterns and get noticed? How do I stand out in a sea of people saying the same things? Find your unique position on it. I think what separates people in saturated industries, like a lot of people would say that podcasting is becoming, I would disagree, but that's a topic for another day. I think that the individual is what will forever make you unique. And I think leaning into your unique stance on something, and that doesn't mean going against what is out there unless that is your stance on it. That's how you separate or differentiate yourself. We have takes in here that are definitely not the status quo. Even the way that I think we do business is opposite a lot of the status quo as far as podcast production goes and content creation goes. In the way that we even interact with our clients who come in here to record is opposite. Somebody was just telling us today they've never experienced a studio like this before. Awesome. That's what we want to hear, because that's how we are different from other people. And I think when we get on the mic here and we talk about podcasting, there's a lot of stuff here that some people in podcasting who have a lot of credibility and who I have a lot of respect for would disagree with, and that's okay. That's what makes you you, and that's what makes me me. So I do think niche harder is the answer, meaning dive deeper into what you know and what you're able to speak on. I don't think just going against the grain to go against the grain, like, don't go play contrarian. I don't think that's helpful. Unless you genuinely feel a certain way, I don't think it's beneficial to just be like, I'm going to take the other stance because everybody's over there. That's going to set you up where you're digging your heels in on things that you don't mean, and then you're going to get called out on it at one point. You're going to look stupid. So yeah, I would say that's how. I think it's actually simpler than it seems. Sounds like a really profound question, but it really just comes down to, like, double down on you. Find your perspective, and then put that thing out there as much as you can. Number 10. How do I build a team around my podcast without losing control? Great question. I think there comes a time in every successful podcaster's life where they can't handle it themselves. For some people who are in a very blessed position when they start, this might be day one. Some people, you might do 1,000 episodes before you're like, I can finally hire somebody to handle this, or this for me. Building a team around your podcast can be difficult because you are handing off a piece of something that you have spent so much time with. You can never copy paste the intimacy that you have with your show to somebody who is coming on board later. You've just simply had more time with them. But that said, I think where we lean on is we want to make sure that whoever's coming in, because we do this whenever we hire people, whoever's coming in here needs to understand the culture of what the company is And then they understand the culture through that of what our clients' shows are on an individual basis. So when EASTON comes on staff, he's told and shown, more so shown probably, hey, this is how we do things at Legos Creative. And the parallel here is to your podcast, by the way. So your podcast is Legos Creative. When you come in here, you see how I do things. You see this is the focus and the approach that we want on our social content. This is how we're going to set the tone on our episodes. These are the points of focus when it comes to the conversations that we have in the studio. All those things inform, this is the culture of the company. Or in your case, this is the culture of your podcast. If you want to even go as far as bullet those things out and put them on paper, I think that's awesome. This is what we are. This is what we are not. Then when it comes to our content, this is what our episodes are. This is what they are not. Social. This is what our social is. This is what our social is not. This is basically brand guidelines at the end of the day. And so I would say putting that information into the hands of the people who are going to be helping you with your show gives them a standard to start with. So now we're at least all on the same page as far as like what we are and what we aren't. When it then comes to doing the work, so if you're going to outsource like the episode edit, the clips, the graphics, the booking, whatever, then it comes down to managing, and that's a different skill set. I think managing is something that some people are inherently better at than others. It is hard. It is definitely hard, even for those who are good at it. I consider myself good at it. It's still very hard at times. But I think knowing your people and trusting your gut makes it a lot easier. So spend time with the people. Hold their hand at the start until you feel like they can walk on their own, and then let them fly. And if they make a mistake, show them why it was a mistake. This all helps you avoid more issues down the line. All of this, I think, is just to say, like, getting on the same page with your team is the goal. And I think those are the best steps to get you there quicker. The more time you can spend together, the more work you can do together, the faster you're going to reach that point of like, okay, I feel like we're here. The second bullet on that is, what do I keep versus delegate? I would say look at your skill set for this. If you can crush edits, do the edits. If you really have a knack on like Premiere or CapCut and you can crush social, do those social clips yourself, keep them. If you're somebody who's like, I actually spend so much time editing the episode and it's ridiculous, figure out what that cost might be for you and then outsource that. I think the goal of delegating is to free up your time and energy to put it into things that will be more beneficial for you. So find the people who can help you take those things off your plate, because those are costing you time and energy, and it may cost you money to delegate it, but your time and energy at that point should be hopefully more valuable than whatever the cost of that person helping you take that off your plate is. All of that, though, to say it's kind of individualized. And I think this goes back to kind of tying it into the beginning of this whole thing. You got to understand yourself. You have to understand your schedule. You have to understand your energy. You have to understand what you're able to do and what you want to do. Because the other part of this that we didn't talk about today is podcasting should be fun. And if you're not having fun, you're not going to want to do this at all. And when we're talking about something that you've signed up for to do every single week for the foreseeable future, it better be something that you look forward to and not something that you feel, damn, that's on my calendar again. I have to do that. The moment you feel that, change something, because that's the beginning of the end of your podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. We love you. We appreciate your time. We're happy you're here. I hope you learned something. Jump in the comments. Something we do here is we say network in the comments. Go find your community. Ask some podcast questions, content questions. We will be there to answer them. And if we don't answer them, we will. There will also be somebody else there to answer them. We're trying to build this community up, and we really appreciate you being a part of it. Thanks for stopping by, and hit that next episode. Go check it out. We got a whole back catalog right now. If this is the freshest one, there's other ones behind us that also bring really good info. Everything's evergreen. Go ahead, check that out. Appreciate you stopping by. Later.